What's going on, everybody? So, obviously, everybody knows that the current federal trial against P. Diddy, or Sean Combs, has been going underway. I believe we're in the middle of week two. We're toward the end of week two. And I just want to make this video because as a black man, as a black person, it really hurts my heart to see so many black people cape for defenders. It be getting on my nerves. And this video is probably going to be more specifically geared toward black men. Not to say I haven't seen black women make comments or anything of that nature defending P. Diddy, but I wanna try to hold the men accountable as a man myself. So, but yeah, a lot of black men are defending P. Diddy or saying free Diddy, or that he didn't do nothing wrong, or that he's basically only being criminally charged for being freaky, for lack of a better word, I guess. And basically, the argument for the people who are defending him, as well as like Loki, literally the actual defense of like P. Diddy's defense, is that like, sure, Sean Combs is a bad guy, but he needs to be charged under the right crime, because I guess he's not being charged correctly. Like, sure, he might be a piece of crap, but this isn't a RICO. This isn't a prostitution case. This isn't a sex trafficking case. It should be a domestic violence case, right? And I think that is just the craziest way to look at it, especially if you're looking at the whole entirety of the case, as well as you look at the definitions of some of these words and what needs to be proven, or what constitutes trafficking, things of that nature, what constitutes a RICO even. I think there's just so much more to the case that people aren't understanding. And the main thing being that I don't think a lot of people understand that if the United States government charges you with a racketeering case, it's really not even a matter of if you did the crimes. Like, it's a matter of like either proving to the judge and the jury that you are guilty of these crimes, or getting the person themselves to admit to them, right? So that brings us back to Sean Combs and the case at hand, which even before the trial had taken place, people were already trying to denigrate Cassie and her story in favor of P. Diddy. And even more so now that we have her testimony, and she talked about she was participating in freak-offs, in some of which she initiated, and some of which she collaborated with Combs, and some of her text messages communicating with Diddy that would suggest that she was a willing participant in some of these actions and some of these events. Moments of abuse, of breaking up and getting back together, pretty much just everything under the sun of their relationship and everything that entailed that, right? So with all the information that's coming forth from her testimony, a lot of men, and again, this is irregardless of color, to some extent, like I'm not trying to paint this only as black men are saying these things. A lot of men in general are saying these things, as well as women. I just want to specifically speak to black men because I'm a black man and I converse with other black men. Most of my social media presence and following is made up of black people, mostly black things, black culture, things pertaining to black culture. So I just want to talk specifically to my black men. But yeah, so a lot of men are coming out and trying to paint it as if Cassie was a willing participant, that she's also just as much in the wrong and things of that nature, which I'm not going to say there isn't a discussion there. And I don't want to say this exact phrase, but like, Cassie isn't the quote unquote perfect victim, right? But that doesn't mean she's not a victim. Just because somebody was a willing participant, and again, willing in quotation marks, just because they participated in something seemingly willingly does not mean they're any less of a victim, right? So for the most part, like if you ask somebody to do something and they say no, and then you beat them to the point where they say yes, just because they proceeded to do the thing that you asked them to do doesn't make them a willing participant. They were participating under the guise of being beaten to submission or coerced, or through the use of force, right? And as we know, the one thing that we know for certain that has been proven is that Cassie was being abused physically, right? We've seen the video of them in the hallway. We've seen what Sean Combs did to her. So we can assume that was on a regular basis, based on what she said, based on the video that we've seen, and then based on the fact that P. Diddy has also sort of corroborated that, right? when the tapes first came out, he actually lied. This was before the tapes came out. He lied about any type of abuse to Cassie, saying this is not true. These are egregious claims against me. Video comes out, then he made an apology, right? So basically confirming that he did those things, or at least confirming that he beat her. And so I highlighted that that's the only thing that's been quote unquote proven, because technically at this point in the case, the claims and allegations made against Diddy have not been fully confirmed. Like, we don't have pictures of him doing some of the things. We don't have literal direct evidence of him doing these things yet. However, we do know that one thing at least to be true, and a lot of people in defense of Diddy are saying, yeah, a lot of these other things are still just allegations. They haven't been proven yet. The prosecution isn't doing a good job, quote unquote, which is, if you've been paying attention, I don't think that's the correct response to have personally, but hey, I digress. So, but basically, all that to say that, yes, Cassie was a victim. Does this mean that she wasn't at all in any way, shape, or form complicit to some of the things? No, but that doesn't make her not a victim. That doesn't absolve her of victimhood status in any way, shape, or form in this case. And I would also argue that her being so open and honest about some of the things that she did, she was very honest, very candid. You could tell from varying different reports about the people who were in the courtroom, you could tell that she wasn't very proud. Like, you can tell this wasn't her proudest moment to share some of the things that she had to go through, or some of the things that she did or decided to do, XYZ, all of that stuff. You could tell there was a level of shame to it. And due to her level of honesty, the argument can be made that she is being truthful. I don't think that anybody who was trying to, quote unquote, frame somebody or take down somebody or being vindictive of somebody would be so honest to share so much of the things that they were doing and that they took part of, because that's a school of thought out there that she's just trying to take down a black man or frame somebody or be vindictive, things of that nature, which is so counterintuitive, because the other argument, like when she opened up with the civil case, the argument was, well, why is she doing the civil case? She should be, if she felt so violated, she should be trying to get him criminally and not get money out of him. But then we're seeing her do that, and now it's the opposite. Now it's, oh, well, she's just doing this because of XYZ, things of that nature. There's still the school of thought about money or some aspect about that, but she already got she got $20 million from Diddy, I believe. She got $10 million from the hotel room that kept the footage and didn't leak it earlier. So I'm just not seeing what she has to gain here from this. I mean, she got on a stand in front of presumably, well, millions of people, just because it's, obviously this is being broadcasted to the world to some extent, not literally, but just through word of mouth and things of that nature, but also in front of a literal audience, in front of government, in front of the judge, in front of prosecutors, defense, things of that nature, and admitted to doing crazy, lewd acts, returning back to Diddy after being away from him, texting Diddy back and forth with maybe some flirty inclination there, scheduling freak-offs, contracting UTIs, participating in freak-offs, things of that nature. There's just no gain for her from a status standpoint, from a social standpoint, monetarily, because she's already got her money. And I think that's also just a weird angle too. I think the concept that Cassie and her new husband are super broke, so they just decided to go sue a billionaire, I think is a crazy angle to come from personally. But yeah, and I guess the only thing that could be said is that maybe there's an argument that she's a scorned, vindictive ex. Maybe that could be the case. I don't personally believe that to be the case, but I'm just saying maybe when this case first started, maybe you could believe that, but I don't see that. I don't think that to be the case. I think it's clear that Cassie was an abuse victim, and she suffered from some type of Stockholm Syndrome or something of that nature. A lot of people seem to forget that people can fall in love with their abuser. That can be a thing. A lot of people don't believe that for some reason, but that can be a thing. It's hard to leave a normal relationship. It's hard to leave a normal, healthy relationship. So I don't see why people can't understand the concept that it's hard. Also, it's harder to leave an abusive one. So yeah, when Cassie and Sean Combs had met, I want to say she was somewhere from like 17 to 19 years old. Now, their sexual relationship didn't start until, I believe, 21, which was said in the case, I believe. But again, met her when she was 17, 19. When he signed her to a 10-album deal, which is crazy. Normally, artists get sort of the runaround in terms of their first deals that they make with major labels. But that was just unheard of at the time. It's still unheard of today. A 10-album deal is crazy. And if we look at the definition of the word grooming, grooming is the act of attempting to form a relationship with a child or a young person with the intention of either essaying them or inducing them to commit an illegal act such as selling drugs or joining a terrorist organization, etc., things of that nature, right? So she met Diddy when she was a teen. They didn't start having some type of relationship until she was 21. But mind you, the power dynamic is already there. As a teen, signed her to a 10-album contract and then decided to get with her, right? Which, again, isn't necessarily a problem if two consenting adults agree to that, but obviously we see where that led and how that can lead to someone being manipulated or just to a power imbalance in general within a relationship. So we already see that in place. And then the other thoughts that people have is, well, why didn't Cassie leave? She left several times before and came back. We literally seen her trying to leave the situation and then what happened to her after he found out she was leaving. So I don't understand why people can't understand this concept of feeling helpless, feeling like you're not able to escape, feeling like you can't get out of a situation, especially when you're signed to this person. That's the other aspect people aren't getting is that, okay, sure, she could run away, but contractually her career is still tied to this man. So there's multiple things that are still keeping her in place potentially. So again, this kind of goes back to the point I was making earlier about if you ask somebody to do something and they say no, and then you go like, okay, well, if you don't, I'm gonna beat you. Or actually, let's say you just actually beat them, and then they say yes. Sure, they complied, they were complicit, but they were complicit through the use of force. You can't really, and I say you can't completely blame somebody. Like you said, she went back. She was complicit in scheduling freak-offs and participating in them, things of that nature. But that is also due to previous history of being abused, and not even previous history, but in the moment being abused. But we'll get back to that later. But to reiterate, Cassie may not be quote-unquote innocent. She may not be an innocent victim, quote-unquote, but that doesn't make her less of a victim. She is still a victim in this situation. But so let's say you're still not sold 100% on Cassie, even though I don't know why you wouldn't be. But if you're not sold on Cassie being a victim, things of that nature, whatever. But to say that this should be a domestic violence case and not a RICO is insane. This definitely constitutes a RICO in my personal opinion. So a RICO charge is basically the state or the government stating that an individual or individuals involved are running a criminal enterprise, right? Or at least are associated with one. Now, how an enterprise is defined according to the Department of Justice and within the confines of a RICO case and trying to prove someone's running a criminal enterprise, is any individual, partnership, corporation, association, or other legal entity, and any union or group of individuals associated, in fact, although not a legal entity. So it could be quite literally somebody running, some type of drug trafficking ring through their laundromat, right? That would be a legal entity. Or it could just be, I have a group of people that I command to do criminal acts for me, or I am one of the people that is commanded to do criminal acts for somebody, but not necessarily an official, legally recognized group or union or entity, right? So now that we have that out the way, what is needed to prove racketeering is that the prosecution must demonstrate that a criminal enterprise existed, that the defendant was associated with or employed by said enterprise, and that the defendant engaged in a pattern of racketeering activity. This is also still from the Department of Justice. And so typically speaking, proof of racketeering activity is a pattern that involves at least 2 acts of racketeering within a 10-year period, right? And so racketeering acts can be anywhere from violent crimes to fraud to financial crimes to drug offenses to other crimes like obstruction of justice, human trafficking, gambling, things of that nature, right? So in order to prove racketeering, the prosecution has to prove that there were at least two different racketeering acts within a 10-year period from this alleged, and I wouldn't be alleged, they would have to first prove that a criminal enterprise existed, and then prove that within a 10-year period that there were two racketeering acts that were related to each other in some way, shape, or form. So let's start with the big one, right? The big one that he's been charged with is, well, aside from the racketeering, within the RICO, is sex trafficking. And I don't know if you guys know, but prostitution is very much illegal federally. There's only really one state that I can think of at the top of my head where it's not illegal. That would be Nevada, and even then it would have to be within certain counties and regions and brothels and things of that nature, right? But Diddy is literally flying people in across state lines, paying them for sexual favors. That is illegal. Paying for sexual favors is illegal anyway within the states, but it is also illegal to fly people within state lines to do that, right? So there's that. And again, technically this hasn't been 100% proven, but we had several different male escorts come in and testify to one being participants in freak-offs, testify to being flown in from various different states or from out of the country, things of that nature, to participate in said freak-offs. So we have that there. The second thing is that some of the key characteristics used to determine sex trafficking, according to the U.S. Department of State's website, is that there must be the use of force, fraud, and or coercion, as well as control and manipulation, right? And so that brings me back to the point when I mentioned earlier that I get back to Cassie. Sure. Did Cassie schedule some of these freak-offs? Yes. Was she allegedly in the freak-offs telling people what to do or how to do these things? Or in one account, somebody said she asked them to urinate into her mouth, in which she tried to do it, and then she, alongside with Diddy, but she corrected him, was like, no, you're not doing it right, and things of that nature, right? That did happen. But on the other hand, we also have a testimony from another male escort saying how Diddy asked her to do something, she didn't comply, and then he beat her so bad that the escort said they weren't able to perform because they were just so traumatized by how bad she was beaten, right? So that, I believe there was another account of that as well. We have multiple accounts of her being abused physically, but the fact of the matter is that there was an account of that, and I believe there are more accounts of that within the terms of the freak-offs and things of that nature. And so we've already seen the video of the hotel footage of Cassie being abused and dragged and beaten throughout the hallway in the hotel. So we already have the precedent set that, at the very least, what we know, like I said earlier, it is proven Diddy is an abuser. That has been proven. And then you combine that we have a testimony saying that he would beat her into submission if she didn't do things that he requested her to do. We also have, I can't remember her name, but a member of Bad Boy Entertainment or Records, whatever you say it, group, Danity Kane. In her testimony, she had referred to a time where her, Diddy, and Cassie went somewhere. I don't know where they were staying. And her and Cassie were in the kitchen. Cassie was making eggs in the skillet. Diddy came downstairs, yelled at Cassie, where are my eggs? Where the F are my eggs? Something of that nature. He picked up the skillet, hit her upside the head with it, and proceeded to beat her while she was on the ground. So we have that account as well, on top of, like I said, multiple other accounts of other people witnessing her being abused, or at least were adjacent to her in the moment of her being abused. We have multiple different testimonies of people saying that he forced drugs onto Cassie. We have multiple people saying that Cassie was taken to different places, different states to participate in these freak-offs. So that is also another, that would be consistent with trafficking as well. If you're taking this person who's not a willing participant across interstate boundaries to participate in sex acts that she does not want to participate in against her will, that would be sex trafficking, y'all. We have again, something that hasn't been proven, but the testimony from Kid Cudi talking about how he was basically trying to threaten him with intimidation allegedly blowing up his car, things of that nature. That's another thing that could add into manipulation or the use of force or coercion. The fact that she signed to a 10-album contract, the fact that we have testimony from Cassie saying that he threatened to release tapes of her in the freak-offs if she ever happened to leave or tell anybody about anything. There's a story from P. Diddy's mother, which, to remind everybody, the defense did not try to retort against her testimony after she had said this. But Cassie's mother highlights a moment where I believe Cassie left for Kid Cudi, or she may have just left, I'm not entirely sure, but she left P. Diddy, and P. Diddy emails or calls or whatever her parents and asked them for $20,000 to recoup damages from, I guess, her leaving him. So they had to take out a loan. They didn't have $20,000, so they took out a loan to pay him $20,000. They paid him the $20,000, and then like 4 or 5 days later, he sends it back. That was literally just a tactic to get them to do what he wanted them to do. It was just a tactic to intimidate, to show how much power I have, and to basically have another way of control, right? So after highlighting all of those things, you can see the use of force, you can see the use of coercion, you can see the use of control, of manipulation that is needed to show or prove what is trafficking in this instance. And like I said, I'm getting this information from the U.S. Department of Justice's website as well as the U.S. Department of State's website. So I'm just going off of this to show that this is what the law is stating for the people who are saying if you're going according to the law, he should walk. People are really saying if you're going according to the law, quote unquote, P. Diddy should be able to walk. But whatever. Another crime that they've shown throughout this case so far, bribery. Plenty different testimonies and accounts of saying how P. Diddy would use his money to silence people. He would have bodyguards go and silence people with money. The hotel manager that witnessed him beating Cassie and dragging her through the hallway, he was silenced with like $50,000, I believe. And I believe he later went to testify. I don't know if he's testified yet, actually. He either has already testified in court or he will testify at some point. But he was bribed to not release the tapes, that would be illegal, everybody. Another thing is that throughout the raids, we have discovered that P. Diddy is in possession of illegal substances, which that one is a crime of itself. Illegal substances being, I believe, like MDMA, cocaine, and a slew of other ones I can't think of off the top of my head, but many different illegal substances, some of them mixed in together, some of them laced within the baby oil, within the Astroglide, laced within things like eye drops. It is illegal, it is a crime to be in possession of illegal substances. Now, the other aspect of that is the distribution of illegal substances, both of these things technically haven't been proven. The defense to the drugs that were found in the hotel room, P. Diddy tried to say that belonged to someone else that he had in the hotel room. I don't believe that. That sounds like malarkey to me, but I digress. The aspect of the distribution, though, is interesting because it's a little harder to prove that one, but there have been testimonies of, like I said, people saying that he forced drugs on Cassie giving drugs to people, his bodyguards giving drugs to people, his assistants and other various employees of his giving drugs to people. So we can see that the groundwork is being laid here by the prosecution to show that there was indeed, or at least allegedly, that I said there's no pictures of him handing the drugs to people, but through testimony and other shared evidence that has been gathered, we can see that he's probably been distributing these illegal substances. And while we're at it, I want to highlight something. I want to highlight how there's a difference between testimony and hearsay. So there's only one difference between hearsay and a testimony. Testimony is a statement from a witness that is given under oath. Hearsay is just statements outside of the courtroom that could be made by anybody, right? And so the logic here, like the defense from some people would say that, like, people have lied under oath before. That is true, right? But obviously it's illegal to lie under oath. And the likelihood of somebody lying under oath is pretty low. So the reliability of a witness's testimony is regarded to as higher because it's taken under oath. There is a penalty to lying under oath. Hearsay is just something said outside of the court that can still be used as evidence, but it is seen as less reliable given that it's not made by somebody who is given an oath to not lie on the stand. So a testimony is seen admissible in court as evidence because it is taken under the oath. So I really want people to understand that a testimony is more than just people getting on the stand and saying something. We are basically taking this to be the truth, which, like I said, people have lied under testimony, but it is a very low likelihood that they are. So now that I highlighted that, what was the next point I had? Oh, yeah. Through the raids, that they've also found unregistered firearms with the serial numbers scratched off in P. Diddy's residences, which is also an illegal act. So when we look at a racketeering case and a racketeering charge, there's a whole lot there to get him on, in my personal opinion, if we're going to have it be up to the jury. Because a lot of people are like, if it's according to the law, he should walk. But if it's according to the law, and when after they're done with the case, when the prosecution's done presenting all of their evidence, when the judge reads off, I don't know the specific verbiage, but he basically tells the jury that they're going to be charged with having to make a judgment based off of the evidence that is presented. Does it prove XYZ? Does it prove this charge? Does it prove that charge under these circumstances, things of that nature? I feel like they have a lot to go off of to get a life sentence. I'm not going to lie to you. If it's not a literal life sentence, it's going to be damn near life. He's going in for at least something. We know that. He's going in for at least something. Even if they don't prove the RICO case, he's going to be tried on abusing Cassie. He's going in for something. I really want to hold people's hands who are trying to defend him so hard, that he is going in for something. He's not walking away. He is an abuser, as well as a sick, disgusting individual, in my personal opinion. Which, like, I guess nobody's arguing that, right? But a lot of people are basically just trying to say that the prosecution isn't doing the greatest job, and they're basically just proving he's a bad guy, but not necessarily that it's a RICO charge. But no, if you're really paying attention to how the witnesses that they're introducing, what the witnesses are testifying to, you can see what they're setting up. Especially even with Kid Cudi. Like, a lot of people think that story was kind of pointless, but it shows some type of nature and a pattern in conjunction with everything else that's already been said, but it's showing a pattern of aggression of someone who is an intimidating figure, of someone who can get people to do things for him. Again, it hasn't been proven, and I will say this arson charge that they were trying to get out of the situation with Kid Cudi. I was like, I think this one's going to be kind of hard to prove, considering that there's no, I'm not going to say direct evidence, but usually when somebody testifies, there's also like another person that can testify to like corroborate the story. I thought maybe they would have said, we had a witness from the neighbor's house who seen P. Diddy lighting the car on fire, or something like that. I thought that was going to be said, which didn't happen. But I will say today, can't remember who said it, but somebody said, Capricorn Clark, Diddy's former assistant, I believe, said something in regard to he wanted to kill Kid Cudi. But then there was also an LAPD police officer. He came in and said that nearby the crime scene, there was an Escalade registered to Bad Boy Records. So that is an interesting find. And I don't know if that's still enough to really add the arson charge, but it's getting a little closer. I don't know if they're going to have more people to corroborate the claims by Kid Cudi that P. Diddy was the one who blew up his car, but we'll see how that progresses as the case continues to go on. So yeah, that kind of just brings me to the closing, or my final point. It really hurts me as a black man to see so many other black men come to the defense of someone like Diddy, especially as someone, or actually even before that, as a man. It also just hurts me to see other men come to the defense of Diddy as well, because as someone who, I value women so much, I have my mother, my girlfriend, my grandmother, like so many different women in my family that I treasure so much and that I value so much and I hold highly, and they're great women in my life that raised me. And because I know so many women, I also know so many of their stories about, whether it be on a micro level of being weirded out by guys, or guys touching them inappropriately, or whether it's to the nth degree of being assaulted or having to deal with abuse and being in an abusive relationship. I know so many of those stories. So it hurts me to hear men be like, oh, why didn't she leave? When it's like, if you're someone who had a family member that was abused, why didn't they leave? It's so interesting and polarizing to me. I can't really wrap my head around it. I mean, I understand why. I understand it's due to misogyny, and men don't really like women, for real. But it's still something that is super hard to wrap your head around as well at the same time. I know it's just a polarizing topic. I will add, as a black man, I do understand the hesitancy to believe, especially when non-black women accuse men of SA, just because historically speaking, especially when it pertains to a white woman and a black man, black men have been falsely accused for SA for decades. It's even so bad to the point, I'm going to have to find the study on this. The overwhelming majority of SA cases are usually, they usually got the right guy. And a small percentage of cases are the case where women are lying. However, for that small percentage, when it's proven that women are lying, 60% of wrongfully imprisoned and exonerated men, and then exonerated men, happen to be black. So I'm not going to sit here and pretend like there isn't a valid concern to be hesitant when black men are accused of assault, SA, things of that nature by a non-black woman. I think that is a fair reaction to have from black men. But I think when you really look at the evidence, when you look at the circumstances, when you look at everything in totality, I just don't think that is the right response to have in this case. And I think we can all agree, if we're looking at it with an objective lens, that this man is clearly an abuser. He's clearly not a good man, and he should be off the streets, in my personal opinion. And I'll say that about any man who abuses women or abuses his power and abuses people, black, white, whatever. It really doesn't care. It doesn't matter to me. If you are a terrible individual, especially terrible to women and children, you don't need to be on the streets as far as I'm concerned. So black people, I really urge y'all, especially black men, I urge y'all to please be on the right side of history, to please look at these people and see them for what they are. I understand they may be icons, music idols. I kind of liken it to R. Kelly. I just think when somebody has been doing something and they're wrong, we should be able to say that they're wrong, irregardless of whether or not they make great music or great films or great whatever. We need to recognize wrong is wrong. We need to recognize what is ill-fitting for this world and for our community and be against it. So that's all that I have to say in regards to that. This is definitely more than just a domestic violence case. This is definitely a RICO, or can constitute as one in my personal opinion, and I would be very surprised if P. Diddy walks away with anything. I'm not gonna say anything less than life, but anything that isn't life adjacent, or because honestly, if you get 80 years, I think especially at 50 something, that's pretty much life at that point. So if you agree, subscribe to my channel, leave a comment, leave a like, let me know what you think. Do you agree or disagree? Do you think he's gonna walk? Do you think he's gonna stay? I would love to engage with the public. But whether you think I'm far behind or way ahead of the curve, I'm miles away. Thank you.